Well, I'm Sarah Edwards.
And I'm Paul Edwards.
And we're really delighted to be here this evening and to have the opportunity to tell you about Let's Live Local.
And about our take on localization and how important it is in this changing world that we live in.
Let's Live Local is a volunteer, nonprofit, 501(c)(3) corporation. And our goal is to work together in the community to create a sustainable place that we can live, work, and shop all in the same place. We live in a mountain community, and so a lot of people here, which we'll talk about a little more as we go along, most people live in where they live here, but they work somewhere else and they spend most of their money somewhere else. So we've been working since 2005 to create a transition movement or a localization here in our own community. And we're going to tell you about what we've done, our story, the programs we're doing, and what we're developing, and most importantly, I think, the lessons that we've learned that we'd like to share and also learn from you all.
And I think that's going to be the most important part of the presentation is the takeaway that we'll be able to provide you. And we're not saying that our experience is your experience or that it is replicable in every community. But Sarah and I have been involved in community organizing as an avocation actually for several decades. We first began our efforts in a community in Kansas City, Missouri, and had some success back in the 70s. And so when we first went to a workshop in Santa Barbara in 2004, we were most surprised to find out that what we had learned back in the 70s was suddenly going to become relevant to the times that we were being told were going to come about at some point in the future. We didn't know how quickly that point would be, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's where it all began for us, was that November day in 2004, and we've been invited to a conference on sustainability, which I was familiar with through my PhD in ecopsychology, and that's actually why we were invited. Richard Heinberg, who you probably all know, as the author of Teach Everything, was the keynote speaker that day. And of course he introduced us to something else that I know that you're all familiar with, the triple threat of global warming and climate change and resource depletion as well as economic instability. And we watched the documentary in the suburbia. So, we're all aware of that now, and I know all of you are, having been involved with Andre. But at the time, I can say there were very few people in the audience, including us, who, oh, is it up? Mine's not up. Oh, that's yours. Okay, yeah. That were, not very many people were aware of that this was happening. And it was really cute, Paul. Remember there was this little couple sitting next to us, an older couple, and when the movie was over, the woman turned to her husband and said, "Oh, well, this is great. We have nothing to worry about because we can walk to Gelson's," which is a very expensive, upscale grocery store, supermarket in Santa Barbara, if you're not familiar with it. And, it was like very difficult, I think, for the people there to grasp, as well as we were driving home thinking, oh my gosh, what does this mean for the future? What does it mean for us? Now, of course, the slide is not up that you're not seeing is all the headlines today that are just, so if you flip to the next slide, we were just saying that, of course, now everyone is aware to some degree of these, and this particular slide has to do with all of the economic and cultural fallout that's occurring right now. But we could have a slide of equal number of headlines related to weather, disruptions, and concern about gas prices and so forth. So, of course, we're all aware of it now. But the point then was as we were driving home, we were thinking, oh my gosh, we live in a little Shangri-La in the mountains, and what does this mean for us? So if you go to the next slide, this gives a little bit of background about our community.
And we want to tell you a little bit about Pine Mountain Club. It's a mountain community that is north of Los Angeles in the Los Padres National Forest. It's surrounded, in fact. And we've described it at different times as a nearby, faraway place. There are about 2,500 year-round residents, as well as others who come here on weekends and vacations. It's a conservative community, with about two-thirds of the registered voters being Republican. And it may seem as though we don't have a lot in common with larger communities where you might live. But actually, as I think you'll see as we get into this presentation and the underlying principles of what we do, that actually there are many similarities. And I certainly found those similarities from the experiences that we had in the Westport area of Kansas City so many years ago, although the topics have changed. Many of the underlying principles are the same.
Right, and you can be thinking about it in terms, if you live in a city, you would be thinking about what we're talking about at a neighborhood level. If you live in a small town, then it would be somewhat similar, only you'll have different needs, of course, than ours. Now, the next slide here is called, So We Came Back, and we came back that winter, and we decided that we would start showing the videos that I'm sure you've all seen that are here on the screen. Then some of the people that came to that began doing home showings in their homes as well. But, you might be interested in how did we get people to come at first, because it was not an interesting topic to people. But it was right around my birthday, so I had a birthday party with a dinner and a cake and everything, and we showed the movie. And so, and then people, well, actually I think people virtually started out initially as just sort of curious about, well, isn't that something, isn't that different? And
it's a new topic.
It took a while of going into several of these different videos as people came back to watch that we could even engage people in entertaining the idea of, well, what would that mean to us? And if you go to the next slide, that's what we started asking at the end of each showing. I said, well, what does this mean? You know, how does this affect us? And I have to say that when it started sinking into people that it would affect them individually, if you'll turn to the next slide, people gulped and either started conjuring up images of Mad Max or Caveman, or to the next slide, experiencing some sleepless nights about, oh my gosh, and then there were others, if you step again, that had a tendency to just sort of put their head in the sand and say, well, you know, this probably won't happen, or if it does, it'll be, you know, so many years down the road.
Or the last alternative.
The last slide here, yes.
Is just forget the whole thing and eat, drink, and be merry while we can. Now, you know, there are a lot of people like that. In fact, we've had some very recent experiences of somebody who was going to be the prime mover in our Mountain Hours program. And go ahead, Sarah.
Well, and she's come to this conclusion. So what we see is that we've gone in cycle from the initial reaction that people started having to what we'll go into in a minute of people becoming interested. And now we're seeing people recycling those same stages of either being scared, head back in the sand, or as this woman told me last week, she said, you know, I really don't want to get into this because if it's all going to happen, I only have so much left in my 401k, and I'm just going to spend it. And my husband and I are going to have a great time. There was one more thing that people started doing. If you turn to the next slide, quite a few people started thinking, well, we'll just head to the hills. And there was a period in the beginning, now, so we were talking 2005, where people started looking and traveling to other communities.
And we did.
And we did as well, like, well, where would it be that we could be safe, and where would we be that we could be positioned for this? But it didn't take very long for us to realize and to sink in that this is a global phenomenon, and there's really not any, you know, escaping it. So every community has its own particular set of challenges.
And so it's really just a matter of trade-offs as to where you are. Now, I think there's some places that are more hostile to localization and self-sufficiency than others, or at least not, I shouldn't say hostile, but when I think about living on a desert, Phoenix or Tucson, I think about living in the desert without adequate, with water being questionable. I just wonder, what the potential is.
But if you'll go to the next slide, essentially our group, the group that sort of stuck with us overall, decided that we didn't want to leave because we love living where we are. And we wanted to give our community a chance. Because after all, an interesting thing about this community is that almost all the people living here are doing so because they want to, because it's a beautiful place. And so they decided they wanted to stay.
The community was actually formed in the early 70s. And so there are few, like most small places, the children that grow up generally leave. But I don't think I've met anyone who was an adult who was born in Pine Mountain Club.
I guess you're right. And, but it's, well, anyway, the population is really broad now, from lots of families all the way up to pre-retirement and retired. So next slide here, Andre, is that in the summer of 2005, we created LetsLiveLocal as a nonprofit with the goal of being able to work together so that we could live, work, and shop here instead of having everyone driving an hour into their jobs, or if they were retired, driving in for all their shopping, all their services, and so forth. And we formed, on the next slide here, it just says we formed a small informal group of people. And flipping right on, here's some of the things that we started out with in the beginning then. And we actually, this turned out to be somewhat of a detour, but it was also good because we joined the local PMCTOA, our Property Owners Association, as a way of, we thought this would be a funnel for reaching the public, and we were part of planning the first PMC Energy Fair. We were instrumental in bringing Donai Donaldson and Robin Loudon from Peak Moment TV down to introduce everyone to it. We were on the planning committee, and we also then got involved in the strategic planning program that year and did scenario planning, in which one of the scenarios was the kind of things that are actually happening now that nobody wanted to think or even talk about much.
That's the matrix that's on the right-hand side of that slide, and what the words actually say related to four different scenarios. One was in the event of the economy being, one end was the economy being good and staying strong, the other was a weak economy, and the other one was with natural disasters and such. And what we wound up doing at the time, everyone thought, well, it's really a choice between Phoenix Rising or Aspen West.
Everything being, and that's really where the community kind of was. Right. Us becoming Aspen West and do more development and have our property values go up. And so in a way that was a detour because we realized, and then later Rob Hopkins has shared, that going to the traditional infrastructure is maybe not the best route to begin with. But at the same time, then we joined, we became one of the first post-peak, the post-carbon outpost. Right. And we got a little publicity when we went up to a conference in Northern California. But the big break for us is on the next slide, Andre. Spring 2008.
And that was when, you'll recall, that oil approached $120 a barrel, $4 gasoline, and what that meant to people in our mountain community was propane bills, because we don't have natural gas. Electricity is much more expensive even than propane. But the propane bills we're looking at, I remember I got our first one, it was about $850. And we said, we've got to do something about this.
And I think this was pivotal because it launched us from being primarily like an educational, awareness-raising kind of an organization into our first major project, where we were responding, and I think the reason that it went off and succeeded the way it has is because it was responding to a felt need. And the felt need in your local neighborhood or your small town it may not be energy, it may be something else.
It may be food.
As of how the prices are rising, whatever, this was our first sort of like open door, and we snatched in there. And if you'll turn the next slide, Andre, our first community-wide project was a wood pellet co-op, and we were able to be bringing the 23-ton truckloads of pellets in to subscribers without a markup. They paid them directly to the company,
to the pellet company,
and at a greatly reduced price from at least a reduced price from if they had to drive in and get all their pellets from Home Depot or Costco, and they loaded. We had orders of 1, 2, or 3 tons, generally speaking, and
so why don't I say a couple of words about that?
You do that.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, the pellet co-op has been enormously successful. We have had almost 200 participating families. On the current mailing list, there are about 160. And the other 40 are people who have left the community because of the economic disruptions that we're all aware of. We have coming in September 3 truckloads of pellets, and I have a waiting list of people because this is such an expressed need that people have to economize on their energy. And it was also a precedent for us in establishing a co-op, and this was the first. And let's turn to the next slide and talk about some of the other things that happened.
Because right after that, we decided to go ahead and incorporate as LetsLiveLocal as a grassroots movement. It took us quite a while to get our nonprofit approved through the IRS because we were going to do so many different kinds of things as localization, and also because we use the word co-op, as Paul mentioned, and they think of a co-op in a very different way than we are doing it. What we're doing is simply serving as a conduit for people to get reduced rates from the supplier. We're not really a co-op in the IRS sense.
In a sense that Ace Hardware is, and many major household names are co-ops, but that's not the way we do it. We do it as a way in the original sense of people collaborating together in order to have mutual benefit
and lower costs and so forth. So our our 4 priorities are on the next slide, and these have been our priorities from the beginning. One being energy. That was the #1 concern, and that was our #1 project. The second one being locally produced food, and then having sustainable local health services, because we had none at all. And then a strong, sustainable local economy, because what our community faced is probably what most suburbs would face, or what most neighborhoods in general would face, because we separate residential areas from commercial areas in large scales in most of our communities. There aren't any services directly there, and the little local stores that would serve neighborhoods have kind of been squeezed out, and ours are definitely suffering. So one of our goals was to essentially build an economy within the confines of our little community.
The way these priorities were established was through a priority-setting process with the core group that was in the formation of LetsLiveLocal. But we also informed ourselves based upon the variety of surveys, one of which was one that we were responsible for when we were active in the planning committee. So let's go more into the priorities.
Each one, and in terms of energy, Paul already spoke, and go to the next slide, Andre, and there's a number of the kind of energy projects that we've done, and each one has to be clicked on. So if you click on the first one, I'll know where it starts. We put on with funding from Southern California Edison a huge energy fair last year, huge for us. We had
300 people.
200 people and dozens of exhibitors of all different types of energy conservation projects. Southern California Edison was thrilled, and the Milton Trail Water District was involved with us as well. They're really on board with what we're doing because we're really lucky in that regard. We have our own water. We own our water, and it's from local springs. We already spoke about the pellet co-op. The cistern co-op is not in existence yet, but it's one of those germinating things. It's been germinating for a couple of years now. We did a seminar on it. That's how we got the water company involved. They very much want that to happen. And we've been working with a company now to set up a solar collective through the company he has, Alpine Solar. And we've been working for how many years now? 3 years with the Forest Service toward the goal, hopefully, at some point, to be able to have our local biomass be gasified so that we don't have to bring the pellets in from, where do they come now, Paul? Idaho?
They're coming from Oregon.
From Oregon, yeah.
Because we live in a forest, and every community has, or different part of the country has different energy resources. In the southeast and in our area, biomass is something that should figure prominently in terms of developing energy self-sufficiency. And we have gotten a willing audience with the Forest Service, but their funding and funding for this project is a big problem, and we haven't solved that one yet.
Yeah, and so in each of your communities, it's like, what are the energy issues and what are the energy resources? Ours happening to be biomass and water. We do have solar, but we're also, a lot of us are under very old growth trees, so we have limitations on solar that people say in Tucson or Phoenix or most of the Midwest wouldn't have. So that's what we've been doing in energy. And then our second priority was food. And in the food area, if you go to the next slide, we started with, right shortly after the Wood Pellet Co-op, we associated with a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Group, called Abundant Harvest Organics, and they deliver here to our co-op weekly on Saturdays and bringing in fresh. It isn't locally grown produce because the farms are about, they're in the Central Valley, but it's local farmers in the sense that they're fairly nearby. And then we have a beef co-op. There is a rancher that is down the road from us who grows locally free-range, grass-fed cattle, and it's Larry Darling Ranch. And so he actually approached us about being a vehicle for his not having to send his animals to the slaughterhouse, the commercial slaughterhouses, but rather to feed the local population. And so we've been operating the beef co-op 2 years, and in fact this Friday will be distributed the results of the latest cow pool. Cow pool, right. People can order a quarter, a half, or a whole of his cattle, and he wanted to be able to subscribe locally, and we were thrilled that someone would come to us and that we had developed enough visibility about what our goals were, that he would approach us and ask if he could come and present his idea. The biggest challenge that we had was, although this was our number 2 priority and actually is our most popular thing whenever we have sign-up sheets at the booths and fairs where we go, is to be able to grow people's own food. People want to grow, but nobody knows how. So we've had a really hard time getting our local growing project going. We have a permaculture training center, a hop, skip, and a jump as a crow flies, a little much longer as the car goes, right near us, and we did a field trip there with our food group. And everybody gets excited, but then they come back and they can't grow, so they don't know how, and there's no one here locally that could teach them. We had a huge breakthrough in that regard, though. Someone in a nearby community has formed a green dragon farm in her and others that she will be in lots, in residential lots. And she is now working with a person that used to be head of our food group, and they're presenting Saturday actually to have the board here approve the donation of a lot to create a community farm here, and she has about 20 to 25 people lined up to work that farm now. So we're feeling kind of optimistic that we might finally get our food things off the ground.
If we'll go to the next slide now, the third priority has been health care. As Sarah said, there is virtually no health care here. There was a dentist here who left, who worked weekends. There was a massage therapist here, but she has moved away as well. The nearest available health care is you get health care where you're insured, and as a practical matter, for most people here, their health care is an hour away.
In Bakersfield or LA, and so I lost my train of thought. So what we did a year ago last spring was we formed a health services exploration working group, and we started exploring every possibility for how we could bring health services in. And I know some people in cities may be thinking, oh, well, we have health services, but the question is, again, is it local?
And is it affordable?
And where is it? I know when we lived in Los Angeles, to get various aspects of our Kaiser insurance, we had to drive almost an hour also, but not because it was an hour away, but because there was an hour of congestion. And it was a giant facility that served a huge massive area. So in a way, what we're trying to put together here is what local communities, local neighborhood communities would need to be putting together. We tried to see if we could get mobile vans to come in from someone like Kaiser or another facility. We explored the possibility of getting grants for a small rural clinic. Everywhere was a dead end until we ran into Dr. Dan Bednar's website, Center for Sustainable Medicine, and he was fascinated with our interest and offered us an opportunity to apply to be the rural participant in his National Consortium for Sustainable Medicine. He required, however, that we do a health survey and provide him with data on what the health needs were. And what we learned from that process was fascinating. One, that we were a federally designated MUA.
Which means medically underserved area.
And we were an HPSA.
Which means health professional shortage area. Well, that wasn't really news to us, but it was great that we were recognized, because we also found out that UCLA, which is in Los Angeles County, which we're adjacent to, hadn't chosen to include us in its surveys of regional needs.
Yeah. So there was no specific health data on our community at all. We learned that, and so we set out to do for Dr. Bednar a very quick, informal kind of survey so that we could get him some information. And the number one resource that people were seeking was basic medical care. That's what they most wanted, and most particularly directed towards the elderly, because here, when you get to be a certain age, you have to go somewhere in town to get all of your care, and it becomes difficult to do that. And now they can't even leave the elderly because their homes they can't sell, and they've lost their 401ks and so forth. So services for the elderly for basic medical care became our primary goal. And we also learned from that survey that people that we're not taking as the next slide, then the one that Andre has up, it talks about the healthcare programs that we set up over the last year and a half, starting with utilizing services that are in existence but are not in the local community and may not be in your local neighborhood. They may be somewhere in the broad metro, but Red Cross is especially valuable to any transition movement, I believe, because they have a wealth of free courses on everything from mass feeding and mass care to psychological first aid, which we'll probably be needing a great deal of as things evolve, where people can give aid to each other. They have many, many valuable courses, and they're free. And then you can also go and become a Red Cross trainer so that you can bring these courses into your own neighborhood and into your own community. We did that, and then we set up the first emergency mental health response team, not only in our community, but actually in the whole county, because there weren't any. We don't serve the county, we just serve our own community. And we began training at DAC, what they call emergency response team, with people who could step in. We live on an earthquake fault, so it's very easy to get people interested in this. But our mind was focused on what happens if there's economic collapse, and how do we mobilize people and have them prepared for that kind of disaster. Our first shelter, which is also quite far away, is in development. And some of the new services that we've created, we didn't create this one. The most exciting was that Dr. Fred Lindbergh is here one weekend a month now as a local house call doctor.
And he does medical checks and does various things that are helpful, but even more important, Dr. Fred is being a catalyst for what is emerging as we think one of the most important initiatives that Let's Live Local will undertake this year and in future years. Up there in the upper quadrant, you see the...
talk about the 888 number.
Oh, okay, all right.
I guess we didn't hear why we had gone into senior care as a sort of starting point, but we think that everything we do in senior care can be expanded out once we get sort of an infrastructure. So what we created we have pulled together or created all of these services through an 888 virtual PBS 888 local number. It's a local number, but it's an 888 number, and they can go ring directly into Dr. Fred, directly into the mental health referral network we created, and into the family caregiving. We've trained 4 family caregivers who can go in and help people care for the elderly in their homes. And we have located a medical claims record-keeping claims processing person to ring right into her, as well as an RX pickup and delivery service, since our nearest pharmacy is a half-hour away. And then, and so that's available now just for people to reach out to, and that doesn't have to be only for the elderly. But then this
is what will be emerging, and you see the logo for Beacon Hill Village, and I'm sure some of you have heard of Beacon Hill in Boston, is something that Sarah and I have written about and been following for a number of years. But as people have realized that moving away is less of an option, the idea of aging in place is coming to the fore. And so our major initiative in this area next will be the staging of an aging in place fair, and we hope which will lead to the formation of our first village, which is a way of people living in a place to again, with a cooperative model of obtaining services that will enable them to be self-sustaining in their own individual homes.
Local services, and they can, when that's in place, it can be expanded out to beyond the elderly. And because it's all types of services, from home repair to pet care, and it's just like a whole community of people supporting each other with their participation of their neighbors.
The next priority is enterprise development. And if we turn to the next slide, we see growing local economy as a matter of supporting existing local businesses, of growing new sustainable businesses, of recycling local resources, and of making access to local services affordable. And so the programs that we have undertaken or participated in are around that enterprise development logo. One of the most important has been a bit of good fortune, and that is that we had the good fortune of Women's Economic Ventures, based in Santa Barbara, of taking an interest because of one of their directors deciding to live here in the economic development of the mountain communities. There had been a desire expressed by people in the local community for this, but it was the coming together, and so we have become a small business development center. And as a result of that, new businesses are getting, or existing businesses are getting consultation at no cost. New businesses are getting nurtured. I'm a consultant to the Small Business Development Center, and it's really gratifying to be able to participate in this way of seeing new businesses emerge from people who formerly were depressed in some cases and looking for where's the next job, and instead they're steamed up about creating their own businesses.
We also approached the Pine Mountain Village Merchants Association to conduct the cottage industry survey, because there's a lot of services here that nobody knows about because they're being operated from home. So we've been working on that, and we also have sponsored a coalition building workshop for nonprofits, because there are a number of nonprofits here, but they generally do not work together, and they don't even really know what each other are doing. And so we're hoping that workshop will springboard us into sort of some coalition building around how we might all support each other in growing our nonprofit service to the community.
We associated with Pine Banks, however, as you heard earlier, that's hit a bit of a hiatus. We've had a number of successful clothing exchanges, and those are well attended and a popular event. Our most recent project is one that is coming to a head this Saturday, as a matter of fact. Our community doesn't have cell service. You can't get a cell phone call here. You can't place one from where we are. And at one time, this made us a great getaway place. But on the other hand, in today's economy, that's no longer possible. There are safety aspects, particularly because, as Sarah said about the problems with earthquakes, but there are also economic considerations as well. And so LetsLiveLocal was able to use its grant from Southern California Edison to fund a feasibility study for cell service, which came in within the last 2 weeks. And Saturday, with the guy who spearheaded this, an engineer, a retired engineer, and I will be presenting to the board of directors and seeking $68,000 with which to buy 2 repeaters, which will give this community for the first time access to cell service.
And so as you're saying, well, gosh, our community has that. It's true, but what this illustrates, I think, in terms of the way we work, is that we head towards the things that are missing in our community. We head towards what people are complaining about now and needing to make it possible for us to be viable here, and we work with the needs, so to speak. And the needs in your community, what's missing in your community will probably not be cell service, but it might be something else.
And at the same time, Andres, I'll turn to the next slide. We've also shared what we know with other communities, and just as we're happy to be able to do that this evening. Let's go to the next slide, because let's talk about some of the lessons that we've learned that may be applicable to your situation.
I think that these are the principles that you might say as to why we've been able to accomplish what we have. And it sounds like a lot, I guess, in a chopped up hour here, but it's really been a very long, slow process beginning in 2005. It seems everything takes a very long time. And the way we've kept it going is, one, we have limited organizational meetings because people find those boring and they get occupied with doing other things in their lives, and they just as soon not sit through those.
The second thing that we've done is to avoid polarizing issues. We moved from the educational model to actually dealing with real problems. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a webinar given by Rob Hopkins, the founder of the transition movement. And it was real interesting to me that essentially what they have learned and he was expressing what's been learned in transition movements around the country, have come to the same conclusions that we have, that this is not an accident. Another thing that we...
By the way, we forgot to mention when we were going into the introduction that we were the 11th transition initiative in the U.S.
Right.
So we've been following the things that he's doing,
and the transition movement.
Yeah, so you were going to go ahead and say that.
Well, another thing that we have found to be important is to focus on here and now needs. Cell service, heating in the wintertime, food. Yeah, these are things that we don't have to agree about whether or not we have global warming or not, but these are things that everybody can participate in. And in fact, I mentioned the fact that our community is not is a conservative community, and we've had participation in these projects from people all across the political spectrum, and it's been done harmoniously.
And the socioeconomic spectrum
as well.
And we've done that by avoiding the polarizing issues and by focusing on things that are living needs that people have, and then we expand out from those needs, which is the point, the next step there is expanding out from the things that people are excited about. That's how we meet new people, for example, and where they can find out about different ones of our programs, like coming into the pellets or coming into the food co-op. And so what we're basically doing is we're following the energy. We're following where there is energy to move ahead.
Yeah, and that means translated into projects. If there's not interest in doing an hours program, however vital that is to finding alternatives to cash, there won't be an hours program. But there will be an aging in place program, because that's where energy is.
Right. We don't have time or energy to beat our heads against the wall with getting, pet projects or things that we think are most, like personally see as a priority. We go with energy, and we have to go with the energy of our volunteers, and so that they're interested, and we'll be interested, or we can get them interested.
And that means letting people who take initiative go, and that we may not have done it the way they did it or are doing it, but as long as what they're doing is ethical and moves in the right direction, we will be supportive of other people who initiate things. And we view our role as to catalyzing other people's efforts to a large extent. We like to spin off projects, and we're not interested in competing, and so stepping on toes is something that we seek to avoid. At the same time, we do get our projects across, we think, because we are able to avoid the conflictual aspect and get...
and we spin off. For example, when the Green Dragon Farms came in, they were feeling very nervous about us because we've been doing food projects, and they thought we were going to be competitive. But our food group head was very interested in it. She got involved in it, and we just said, go with it, we'll pull out of food. So for right now, we have a proposal before the board that we will just sort of step back from food and let them carry that ball. I mean, they're going to carry it anyway.
No, from food growing. Yeah, from food. But from food growing, the beef and the organic food harvest co-ops will continue.
Yeah, we want to just support them. If there's somebody else, some other organization or group that can do it and get the task done, then great. We have more than we need on our plate. And I think that stepping on toes has been one of the keys of just being really cautious around the political issues and who has which agendas, and not stepping into those. And then finally, just the unending patience and perseverance over these years. Now, we found ourselves facing some challenges that you guys may be facing too.
Next slide, please.
And that are on this slide. It's rather, if we allow ourselves, we could become discouraged because the pool of volunteers and people with expertise is shrinking. Not because they're not here, but maybe partly.
No, because they're not here.
They're not here. They're leaving because of foreclosures and short sales, but also because they're leaving because they're burned out and stressed out and coping. I mean, they're living in coping. And because, like we said, there's this volunteer drift, they're moving back into the various stages of let's go, we just meet and remarry, or let's pretend this isn't happening because we can't cope with it. We have to just do what we can. These growing levels of denial and escapism, we're seeing it taking, these various factors taking a toll on our volunteerism. And, of course, the lack of funding sources and the capacity for funding has been ubiquitous. We get wonderful letters back that have exact same wording, so we think that all these organizations are going to the same workshops on, due to an unusual number of applications, we were unable to respond positively to your excellent application. So,
they're all reading the same, we haven't funded you manual. and also, most importantly, is that increasingly we find that our economy locally is fragile, it's distressed, businesses are closing while at the same time we're nurturing others to begin. We will be participating, and in fact we did participate in co-sponsoring a Living Local survey to find out the shopping patterns. I forgot to mention that during enterprise development. This was really important because it was done at a professional level by professionals, and we got a lot of data which is now in the process of will be translated not only into the people that we're consulting with, but also to the wider business community.
And so our philosophy about these challenges is that we just have to keep going forward, because what's really the alternative? We're not going to put our heads back in the sand. We can't. Voltaire said, once you've opened the gate and walked into, past the gate, there's no going back when it comes to knowledge. And so we can't go backwards, and we can't, personally, Paul and I can't move into the Mad Max scenario, so we're just going to keep plodding ahead. And the final slide there, Andre, is just to say that's our story, and that's what we've been doing. And one more slide here. We want to open it now. I wish we had more time for that, to our talking, questions, discussion about what's happening in your communities and so forth.
And what you've learned and what you might instruct us on, because we are really open for learning, because while we think we've found some things that work, we know we don't have all the answers. So with that, can we turn that over to others, Andre?
Yeah, absolutely. So for this section, again, what we're going to do, everyone, is if you want to say something, if you want to ask a question or share what you're doing in your community, just pause, say your name, pause, and then I'll pick the person who I hear first, and I'll make sure that if there are two people that I get to the next person after the first person goes. So here's your chance for questions or saying some of your own experiences. Who'd like to go first? Okay, why don't you go ahead? I only heard one person there.
I'm curious how you managed to get meetings to be limit to organizational meetings. I'm wondering how you did that.
How we did what?
How we limited the organizational meetings.
Well, we got this core group together, and we formed a process. I mean, we formed our.
Can I go take it another?
Yeah.
Take it another step. We made the decision that the board of directors did not need to be representative of the people who were involved in the projects. That what we needed was an informed, but small group of people who got along together that would essentially handle the policy, but were not necessarily involved in the organization. So what this has meant is that we have perhaps 1 to 2 board meetings a year. We conduct most of our business by email, and meetings have become insignificant in terms of the broad spectrum of activities that we have. Is that an answer to your question?
But there's more, Paul.
Okay, go ahead.
The meetings are around the working groups.
Right.
Like, for example, when we were doing the health exploration, the people that are interested in that that we know have an interest in that, we invite them to be part of a working group, and we meet, and then we start working on the projects. Right. So they're project-oriented. If we're doing a grant, we put together, and people who would like to see that grant come to our community, then they meet as a project group. And so we actually do have a lot of meetings. It's just that they're working meetings around accomplishing specific goals.
As opposed to project meetings that ask questions like, why are we here? We don't do that.
Paul had the Energy Planning Committee, Energy Fair Planning Committee morphed into, what would it morph into, Paul?
We're now an Energy and Utility Working Group.
Yeah, and so our Health Exploration Group has morphed into Senior Aging in Place Village Concept Group. And the number of people changes, but there's usually like a throughput. There's usually 3 or 4 people from the one that it grew out of that stay with it, and then new people that are interested in the new topic come into it, and it's just very flowing.
In other words, Robert's Rules of Order is gathering dust on the shelf. Does that answer your question?
That was pretty interesting. There's a lot more to learn about that.
Yes, there is.
But I don't want to hog the airwaves, so I'll see if somebody else has one first.
Right. Yeah, you're right. There's a great deal more to this than what we were able to do. But those are some of the conclusions that we've come to.
Okay, who's next?
Jane.
Jane is next. What's your name?
Jane. J-A-N-E.
Jane, go ahead.
How do you raise money for projects? We struggle. We're always broke.
Yes.
Well, we're always broke too. We're nonprofit, and we really are a volunteer organization. We try to get grants. We're going after 2 more. We're going after some grants to fund this Aging in Place Village Fair. We have 2 in mind. I have no idea whether we'll get them. All the ones we've applied to so far, we haven't gotten. Sheila Clark has gotten 2 for her organization, which we've not received any funds from, but we've been supporting her and getting her projects going. And the Green Garden Farms did get a funding from a local nonprofit here called Tri-County Watchdog. It's just very difficult. We are always skimping along, and if we hold an event, we take donations, and the people put like 20 and 40, 10 and $5 in the kitty, and we use that for, I guess you could say really that Paul and I are funding this, I guess you could say, Paul.
Basically,
in terms of paper and supplies and internet.
And office and that sort of thing.
But we have a little bit of funding sometimes when the amount of money for moving the pellets adds up, it turns out to be less than what we had anticipated, and then we can use that funding for things like purchasing the virtual PDFs for a year. Pretty skimpy.
I don't know that I don't think you had a chance tonight to ask a question, but those are our comments. Is that responsive to what you had in mind?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and what we're finding is that we can make do on relatively little as long as Sarah and I are willing to provide the basic overhead for an organization.
Yeah, Paul does the pellet co-op, and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
We started doing volunteer. There's a woman that handles our food co-op, the delivery from the CSA. She puts in essentially 2 hours a week. And I started trying to keep the hours in the president's volunteer board, the U.S. president, so that we could say how many hours we have. But truthfully, it took so many hours to keep up with the hours that I had to give it up. I mean, I would love to have in my annual report, we had 15.
So many thousands of hours were volunteered.
I can't keep it up.
Right.
Okay, that's great. Who has another question or something they want to share?
This is Diane from Virginia.
Hi, Diane.
And I need to just find a little bit more about the food co-op. You say it's a CSA, which we're familiar with here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get just like a huge CSA delivery, or is it broken down per family, or do you break it down?
No, it's broken down per family.
What happens here is that they will actually not come to Hamilton. They come to Lebec, which is about 35 minutes. So our co-op is now, I mean, I know this will probably time as you all probably, but we have around 16 people deliveries a week that come up here. And so
The people that are participating. They take turns.
Our co-op organizes, Vicki organizes who will go down. She gets all the slips so that they can be given to the people down in Lebec to take our boxes and bring them up here. And they meet in the cul-de-sac and everybody picks up their box.
One piece that's missing from that is that the way that people they place orders on the website of the CSA, and they're able to see at the beginning of the week, and they're able to see what's going to be in their food box, and if they want to opt out that week, they can. And so the boxes are filled by the CSA organization, delivered then to Lebec, and then, as Sarah described it, picked up by a volunteer each week and brought to the community.
Right. Yeah.
Does that answer the question, Diane?
Yeah, it does. But what I was thinking about would be if there would be a way in our community, because we have a number of CSAs that deliver, but if there would be a way, I'm just thinking out loud here, for us to save money by having a mega delivery where we would have the volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, yeah.
Actually, that's a good idea.
You can make money because the people that have the one where it's delivered in Lebec, they're making money. They won't share it with us, but if they didn't, if we were them, we would be picking up a little bit of money for each box. And you can probably do that.
We wouldn't be, I don't think we'd use it to fund ourselves, but we would, try and save money for our members.
And that would be fine.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right.
Consolidating, so the farmer or the producers wouldn't have to box things in individual orders. That's just what I was thinking.
Right.
All right.
Great, good question. Okay, who is next?
How about me?
What's your name?
John Spears, California.
Hi, John.
Go ahead.
Spending 2 weeks in Mexico where I had specifically wanted to look at the way the middle class in Mexico is addressing issues of resilience. And I'm thinking, this whole discussion is predicated around where, what's coming down and where it's going to land. And so I was, and I've also been involved with young farmers doing pasture poultry, a la Joel Salif and so on. And it just seems to me like the whole discussion was kind of how we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
You have to define, you have to decide where the economy is going to land, and not just the economy, but I think Heinberg says that we use was the energy economy and economics. And I don't think it's going to land in a place that was represented by this discussion. I think it's going to be. What if it turns out that it's lower than having cell phones in places that are undiscovered by cell phones?
I'm glad you raised that.
We're glad you raised
That's
that
where we think we're going.
because we agree with you.
It's just that we're in transition here right now. And if we don't want to go under right now and not exist right now, we need the cell phone system right now. I don't think that's where we're going to be.
Yeah, you understand that, John, that we call this period that we're in the gap, and this is something that we cover in our sustainable livelihoods presentation. And the gap is between the life that we've known and where we're going. And so we do things like fund a cell phone feasibility study because it's something that is appropriate for the gap, while at the same time the capacity to grow food is one of the most important things. And age in place is vital and does play a role in terms of the long term.
Giving people the skills, teaching them how to do self-care, teaching them how to care for one another is leading towards where we think things will probably end up. But in the meantime, if this community is going to be here, they have to be able to stay here. Mm-hmm. So we have to have, no, I don't think we're going to be able to go down to the pharmacy ultimately and have this RX pickup and delivery.
Well, as a matter of fact, one of the places that we're looking at spending money is, Sarah, you've been investigating this in terms of buying the stock for homeopathic medicines.
Yes, stocking that, and also we have done in that survey, we identified the most common drugs people needed, and we want to do a project that doesn't have a lot of support right now, but we're kind of cultivating it a bit, of being able, since people want to grow, perhaps they could grow medicinal herbs from here, or even, and start to learn what are the plants and so forth that exist here. Our backyard, our back area is filled with willows. We have a lot of spinny meadow. We have a lot of things that can be utilized. So we have to be working sort of on, at least here, and maybe not elsewhere, but here we have to be working on two levels. We have to be working on a level of living in the gap and having people not go under, and we have to be working on laying foundations for things that will be in place when all of that doesn't exist anymore. Does that make sense to you, John?
Yes, it does, and it doesn't address the scenario where if things change fairly rapidly, people are going to die.
Yeah, well, you're right.
Well, you're right.
There are people who are not going to. Just in Mexico, and I had a wonderful privilege. I was staying in bed and breakfast. So on. It was a wonderful thing. And those people are living on $10 a day. Now, if we all looked at ourselves and said, how could we live on $10 a day? We would, first of all, look at our mortgage, and second of all, look at dental care and food, certainly. I feel very fortunate that in my 20s, I had a mentor who said, "Put your own aside for yourself." And you got to feed yourself, you got to shelter from the elements, you have to eliminate food. But there's not much that we need, and we don't necessarily need pellets and for a wood stove and cell phones.
We don't need wood pellets?
I did love something that you brought up there, which is when you approach the doctor about cell phones. The first thing he did was, I want a medical. That's exactly what we do in Cuba, which is an example that we need.
I wanted to just say in regard to quickly pellets.
I just wanted to inject that into the conversation.
The reason for pellets is that it gets to be very, very cold here. So some source of heat has to exist, and we live in a forest. That's what's possible
Are an industrial product.
But as we start to use the resources of our forest and we start having relationships with the Forest Service, you see this is an evolutionary process, and you're right. It could all happen tomorrow, and then everything we've done is down the drain. However, we only have what we have, and we have a forest here. So we want to move to be able to heat our homes with our forest. Right now, that's not in place, but it can be. And the people that are participating now can move into that.
The city of Willits in Northern California has done something very similar. They've done an assessment of where they get their food, where they get their fuel. So applaud what you're doing. I think from my impression of what you're doing, you're aiming a little too high, because what our future looks like is more like the middle class in Mexico, not, we could just have private property the way you're holding it, and handling money the way you hold it, and
So, John,
401k the way you have it. And
I have a question for you, John, though. I have a really serious question for you. I would love to do that. How do you get a community of people who don't even think that anything is happening yet to move that quickly to that position? I'd love to do that. If you have any ideas, I want to pick it up.
Yeah, therein lies the rub, isn't it? And I got another question for you.
Well, hang on a second, John, before you go on to your second question, I want to address this one too, because it's a really big question that you're bringing in. You're not the only person who thinks that this is going to go sideways really quickly. And I've had the pleasure of working with Sarah and Paul for years now, and believe me, we've had conversations. We all get it. We really, really get it. But when it comes down to, hang on, let me just finish. But when it comes down to actually getting a community moving, they are discovering what a lot of other people who are in this pathway discovering. And it started, you may remember the Outposts that the Post-Carbon instituted. That was before the Transition Initiative came around. So these outposts, they very quickly found out that if their meetings talked about the very worst situations that could possibly happen, and often what would happen is the group who would arrive in that very first meeting would split up, and there would be some people who say, oh, no, it's not going to be so bad, and then there would be people like us who see that it could get quite bad. Well, if they let those meetings talk about the worst case scenarios, they got no one that was true to it.
You know,
it really comes down to that.
I can add to that,
Andre. People so far. And one more thing, we're going to just go until 7:15 because we started late, so we still have another 10 more minutes. But go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I'd like to add an example of that. When we started the medical sustainability, our goal was to set up a Cuban model here. When we introduced that idea to Dr. Bednar and Dee Dee Piercehouse, to our working group, it split the group immediately, and we lost half of our people. And it happened to be, by the way, the people who were willing to work on something. So we had to bring our goals back to set up something where the Cuban model that we would like to set up here can be implemented out of what we've created, because the people here are not going there for quite a while.
Who were the people that you lost?
Well, we lost,
Half the group.
yeah, and half the group were people with health backgrounds. One had been a senior guy with the University of California.
Yeah, but the doctor, I know what they think.
Yeah.
But see, they're the ones that would work. They're the ones that would do the work. The
And
people
have the
we didn't
connections.
lose were the people that wanted to sit, they wanted to sit in a group and envision and, say, if we just hold an image, it will all happen. Well, we got to have workers. So we had to back up a bit.
Yeah, the Cuban doctors, when they go into these communities, the first thing you do is a health assessment of everybody, and what their needs are, so yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Anyhow, thank you for your work and
Thank you.
And the discussion and indulging my having recently been in Mexico and seeing what the middle class lives like, which I,
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, the point you
I think you're right.
It's just really on target, John.
millions of people.
And if you ever come our way, we'd be delighted to meet you in person.
And you share your insights here.
Yeah, I've written down I've never heard of your town. What is it called?
Pine Mountain Club.
Why the club?
Well,
It's a property owners association.
yeah, right. It's not a formal government.
But we have no government.
And most of the people who live here, at least most of the people that we associate with, would love to drop the club. But that's what it says on the corporate papers.
Okay, I got plenty of friends like that myself.
Okay, everyone, we're gonna get the next question in because we're running short on time. So John, thank you very much for that. And who's got another question for
Hey, we got
Sarah?
all the time in the world for these issues.
but not on this phone call, we don't. So, who's got another question?
This is Kim from New Jersey. I just have a comment that I wanted to
Sure.
Yeah, please go ahead, Kim.
Thank you so much. Living in a conservative community, I can really appreciate, what you conveyed today and how difficult it is in trying to, get everybody on board and staying away from the polarizing issues. And so I just want to thank you. I don't feel so isolated now. and having conveyed some of the issues that you've been dealing with for quite a long time are some of the same issues that we've been dealing with for the last couple of years. And so it gives me great hope. And I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing the lessons learned and the challenges that you've been experiencing.
Well, you're most welcome, and thank you for your comments, Kim.
That's great. Okay, we have time for some more questions or comments. Who's next?
This is Adam.
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a comment on the visitation. Like, did Sarah Paul say that global warming was a polarizing issue? Because, I think that, yeah, is it polarizing?
It's a polarizing issue here because, as I said, this is a primarily conservative community, and there are a good number of people that do not believe that. I can't believe they're still thinking this, but there are a lot of people here who don't think that that's happening. They think that these odd things are just flukes that will pass, or it's just a natural phenomenon. There's a lot of people here who absolutely hate Al Gore. I mean, they think he's a I don't even know a word for it, a traitor. And so we're working. So yes, that's very definitely a polarizing issue here, as is peak oil. There's a lot of people here that think that's malarkey, that there's plenty of oil forever and ever. Yeah. So yeah, they're polarizing issues.
Also, another question on the healthcare. Like, I remember what John said about like the things. If we take our medicine like very slowly, like our prescription drugs, and people are gonna die. Is there any talk in the healthcare plan of like having a system set up to like help people be okay with perhaps dying?
Well, yeah, by having the aging in place and having in-home caregivers, we actually do have a very good hospice program here that comes in from outside, like most things. If we can pick up those hospice skills and have people will also be dying in place, and it will be dying is a natural phenomenon that has lost its naturalness. So that will have to. We hope that that's something that will come about as more people are caring, know how to, and are caring for their loved ones who are ill or who are aging, and they have the help of other caregivers who can come in and give them some respite from the community. Ultimately, I don't see any of that being done with any money, as John was saying. We'll all have to just be doing that for each other. So yeah, I think that's a really big issue. We haven't talked about it because talk about polarizing issues. People don't really like to talk about death, so we've got to set things in place so that can happen.
Okay. I agree.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that.
Great, thanks for the question. Okay, time for maybe one or two more questions or comments. Who's next?
Okay.
Question again quickly. This is Simon in New Jersey.
Go ahead, Simon.
Just thinking about how people connect with each other. I'm remembering a time when I was a member of the Let system and we had a directory of people, and it was a really good feeling knowing that you could just pick up the phone and connect with someone who had a story to share. So we had that there. The other idea was some kind of community notice board, which could be electronic, could be on the internet, a way for people to connect and communicate. So, and if you have any ideas to share on that, I'm hoping to help together Let System Dawn over here.
That would be great. I think a directory is a wonderful idea, and we hope something like that can come out of the survey that we did of cottage industries, because we don't know what the resources are that we have. And if we could get together a directory, where, like you say, people could just look at it and see what kind of things they need and realize that they don't have to drive out of town for everything.
Yeah, and I think that's awareness. I think a lot of things can be done electronically, which is a whole other reason why distributed power is going to be an increasingly important issue for communities to survive local power production. But I think a lot of this can be done electronically. Certainly the principles of social networking and are usable. In our community, however, while a lot of people belong to Facebook, they are not participating in groups to my knowledge. And it is not a way yet for people to connect. The connections in this community are best face-to-face.
I think that's one reason we have trouble getting the hours program going, because you have to log on and you have to work that system. And
it's too high overhead if it's not done electronically.
Yeah, so it just hasn't happened yet. But I hope you get your REST system going.
Yeah.
I just want to say, it's great to hear your initiatives, promoting new business enterprises, so that's great. I like to hear that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually my field. Sarah and I are writers of business books. We wrote the first commercially published book about how to work from home, and so it's something that's near and dear to my heart.
Great. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Yes, indeed.
We think the home is going to be the future
production,
redistribution, and community center, as Sharon Astick has written about in one of her wonderful blogs. We're certainly not there yet. Well, we are that in some degree. There's a lot of home businesses here.
Yes, there are.
Because there's not much commercial space.
Yeah, it's great. And, people having avenues to express themselves and to maybe, develop aspects of themselves which they may not develop before. The community is rich, collectively, because we all have so much experience and skills, variety, diversity that, when we pull it together, then we're so much richer than we thought we were.
That's a perfect place, I think, for us to bring this webinar to a close. I want to thank everyone for participating tonight. I want to thank especially Sarah and Paul for putting the time into this presentation. And Sarah and Paul, do you want to say anything to the people who attended this evening?
Well, yes. I want to first thank you for spending your time, because we know firsthand how much an effort and a sacrifice it is for people who are working many, many hours a week to devote to their communities. And that's what you've done tonight, is to invest in the communities. And so I thank you for coming, and I hope that what we've had to offer will be of benefit to you as you extend your efforts into your own community.
I want to thank you too, Andre, for holding a space like this, in a place where we can share what we were doing and where we hope we can learn more from other of the seminars that you do about what other people are doing elsewhere. It's really an honor for us to be here tonight, and thank you for coming.
Well, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure to work with you both, and I'd love to do this again. So with that, let's call this a call. And some of you I recognize from our courses. Thanks for coming tonight. Others I don't know. I hope I get the chance to meet you in one of our future courses, perhaps with Paul and Sarah's course. They have one that specializes in looking at what are the likely places that you can create a livelihood as this economy contracts. The economy will not come to a complete standstill. There will be some transactions that will still take place. So they've actually done the work of looking at what could those livelihoods be. So we'll be having, check on the website, you'll be able to see when that course next is.
And our website is elmstreeteconomy.com. I might mention that because that's a way that we're wanting to characterize.
Great.
What we're creating,
Okay, everyone, there'll be a wrap-up email probably going out to everyone because who signed up with a link to the audio for this. And that won't happen until next week at the earliest. And because some people couldn't make it tonight, so we're going to just blast the audio to And with that, have a great rest of your Wednesday evening. Good luck in all your transition activities, and hope to see you all again soon.